Good morning again, Coffee Chat friends, and Happy New Year for sure. This is New Year's Day 2015. Time to push reset, right? We talk about resolutions today because that is a big thing that comes up in the consciousness of so many of us when the calendar, the man-made calendar, flips over to a so-called new year, right? And a lot of us want to set out and achieve different things or achieve better things or set our New Year's resolutions, or at least embark upon our New Year's resolutions. Now, I just wanted to talk about this a little bit because it generally comes up quite a bit in conversations this time of year. Now, resolution, of course, the root word of that is solve, resolve. So when we want to solve something, we want answers, right? We want to have some sort of a remedy for our situation. And anytime you're doing it again. So resolve is like you already had that at one time, and you're reinforcing it. So a lot of the times, things that we want in resolutions are things we've wanted before. They're classic things like losing weight and quitting smoking. These are very common types of New Year's resolutions. Now, I guess the question is why do we have the tendency to set these New Year's resolutions? I think a lot of it has to do with customary. We're accustomed to that. We're used to hearing a lot of people talking about it, so it gets us thinking. It's kind of like, in November in some places they have this Movember thing. People grow a mustache for November, and it just becomes, a lot of people don't even think about why it would be. And it had to do with some charity at one time probably, but mostly it just becomes customary in a workplace. The other guys are doing it, so I'll do it, kind of thing. So New Year's resolutions, I think, have a lot to do with that. It's following the Joneses, if you will. But I think that there's more to it, though, is that, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, there's the tendency for us to feel a certain way, which motivates us to want to change. And I just wrote down a couple of things that are taking place in this time of the year. It tends to be the darkest time of the year. It tends to be the coldest time of the year. It tends to be a time where we probably overate. We're not satisfied with our indulgences that we have done over the holiday. We feel a certain amount of lethargy as a result of it, lack of energy, because we're bloated up. There's also a tendency for people to be bored this time of the year, and also a greater degree of rates of depression. So people are feeling down very often, and we get to the point of feeling enough already. You want some sort of a change. So we get this idea that let's get things moving, right? So all of those are legitimate. There's legitimacy. There's a good. You can see the value in things like boredom in that case, and feeling down and so on, because if it's going to motivate us in some way to change, then that in itself has, if in fact we want to change, then it's beneficial, right? To that extent. Why do we fail though? Why do so many people fail? And the rates are very high. I remember last year when I talked about this, 70 or 80% of people who set some sort of New Year's resolutions don't actually achieve anything. Never mind all of it. Just vast majority of people, it's just wishful thinking for the most part. I think it's because this is mostly reactionary. It's not something that we've set out to plan that much. We haven't strategized. We haven't gone through the process of actually setting meaningful goals and benchmarks and what have you. It was just a reaction that I'm feeling overweight, so therefore I want to do something. It's just an idea. It hasn't developed any farther than that. And there's value in that, in developing an idea. The start's got to be somewhere, right? However, there's not follow through. And I think the reason that there's not follow through, one of the biggest reasons, is that within weeks and months of having talked about and considered these New Year's resolutions, the motivation, the major motivations just evaporate. I mean, if you think about it, the days being dark and cold, well, within weeks and months, depends where we live, but within, a not too distant future, things start to get brighter, days start to get longer, days start to get a little bit warmer. We're back into our normal routine of working, therefore we're not on the holiday binge of eating and drinking. We're not so bored because then we're back into a routine, and therefore depression tends to drop away, this sort of thing. So we forget about the motivation. And without a motivation, we don't have the drive to work towards, the resolution becomes irrelevant, right? Because everything that we're going to do in life, there has to be a motivation behind it. And if you take that motivation away, though it may have been there, if you take it away completely by all the circumstances changing, then it's no longer an issue. Therefore, it just falls away. It's a natural progression. It's just like, I want this now, but in 3 months from now, all the reasons why I wanted it are gone. So therefore, the resolution is gone. The question might be then, if we truly do want to make meaningful changes in our life, and we recognize this tendency of them wanting to fall away, why can't we at least use that initial momentum of wanting to set the resolution to actually making something work? I think there are a few things that we can do, honestly, to make these things work. One of the things is we can actively involve ourselves in setting a bigger motivation. If we realize that year after year, these motivations that we had for the resolutions completely evaporate and fall away, how about we work on setting up a motivation that will not evaporate and fall away? How can we do that? Well, perhaps we can kind of evolve our motivations into something more tangible. For example, a lot of our motivations, our resolutions rather, revolve around either wanting to quit something or to lose something. I use that as because we associate the problem with what we want, but it is associated, of course, but almost too directly. So we get the impression that, okay, I ate too much and I'm feeling fat. Therefore, what I want is to lose weight. Is that really true? Do we actually ask ourselves the question, is it really true that I want to lose weight? Or, you see, when we want something, that's always a positive, right? If I want something, I want to gain something. So rather than, sure, it's great in the progression of the feeling of the pain of feeling bloated and so on, and then progressing into the realization that I want to lose that sense of bloatedness. But why do I want to? It's because by losing it, I gain something. So if we work with ourselves by asking questions within why, we get to understand what it is that we possibly want to gain as a result of losing, right? Because there's always two sides to something. Same with quitting. When I used to be a fitness instructor, people would tell me they want to quit smoking. Well, sometimes eventually I would ask them, well, what do you want to start? See, that's an equally important question. Because if you just quit something, you create a vacuum, which will be filled. A vacuum will not remain empty. If you just quit smoking without any consideration of what it is that you want to improve in your life, then you just created a vacuum of time that you were going like this. Same with wanting to lose weight. Okay, what do you want to gain? This sometimes is just a psychological mind game that goes on. But nevertheless, it is and can be very important. See, once we ask these questions, we can gain for ourselves a greater motivation, something that we can grow towards. See, when we're always thinking in terms of quitting and losing, it's very difficult for us to see what it is that we're moving towards, in a way. the concept of losing and quitting is a regressive way of thinking in a way for our psychology. But if we're thinking in terms of gaining and starting, we've got something we're moving towards. We're motivated, like it's a motor that's starting to go, and it's kind of driving us along. So the question why is a very important question to continue to ask. And because by doing that, we can understand that the reason we want to lose or quit is because we want to gain and start. But then by continuing to ask the question, we can find greater clarity as to what we want to gain and what we want to start. And then we can begin our focus process on those gains and starts. And this to me is a much greater motivation than just focusing on the momentary suffering of darkness and cold and having eaten too much and feeling bored and depressed. These are all momentary things which are going to disappear as soon as we move ourselves out of the current tail end of the holiday season and back into the routine, and the days get brighter, the days get longer, they get warmer, we feel less bored, less depressed, a lot of that excess eating has fallen off, and if that's all we're relying on, those are all going to be gone for the most part, or the power of them is going to be gone. But if we've taken the time to use that moment to begin to ask our questions, what it is that we really want, deeper, what do we want to gain, what do we want to start, and that's just the beginning though. And from there we can use our creativity to do some planning and visioning and this sort of thing, and we can see meaningful steps that we can take, and when we realize we can do it, we're willing to act, we take action steps. When we act, we're going to get little results, that's evidence, so we're using reason and evidence, and then we start to multiply things, and we actually start to manifest, if you will, our resolutions, our real resolutions. Some thoughts for early 2015 once again. New Year's resolutions, they're a very common thing. Many of us set them. Many of us fail at them. And I feel the reason is because we don't have a strong enough motivation for them. And the motivations that we do have eventually fall away. But if we work on developing stronger motivations for more meaningful resolutions of gain and starting things that are important to us, we'll have a much greater success rate with our New Year's resolutions for 2015. It's been great chatting with you again. My name is Steve, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.